What is going on? Welcome back to Financial Journey. So today I want to give you a good overview of Rivian, go over some of the data points, technicals, and where I see things going at least in the short term, especially considering the last week has been one hell of a wild ride and not necessarily in the same direction that I would have assumed it was going to go. So I'm going to go over all that. Make sure you guys hit that thumbs up and subscribe. I always greatly appreciate that. And with that said, let's get right to it. So on Friday, it did close down 0.69%. So it was in a little bit more of a tentative sell-off. And that was largely because of this news that did come out. So is Rivian stock at risk of losing its Nasdaq spot after steep stock sell-off? So they are talking about its inclusion, for instance, in the Nasdaq 100, which of course does add a lot of actual visibility through a lot of ETFs. So a lot of ETFs hold Rivian because of its inclusion. So if it does get knocked off, that does mean that a lot of institutions would be reducing their position equivalently in Rivian stock. So not necessarily the best thing, but of course, as I've said over the last several videos for a long time, actually, in fact, Rivian stock just has not made sense. It should be significantly higher, and it definitely shouldn't be a 13.6 billion market cap company. It should be significantly higher. But of course, it's just the fact that people think of Rivian and assume that they're just burning through a ton of money, which they kind of are, but they are improving enough so that they actually might achieve profitability in 2024. So it's one of those things, depending on your time horizon on when you are investing. If you're investing on the long term, then yeah, just buy it. And then forget about it, because in years from now, once they do have profitability, and especially based on their Q1 earnings, they said that they are number one. A lot of companies were asked, like, how is your demand? A lot of companies were kind of hipping and hawing, and Lucid just didn't really answer. Rivian, they said we are number one. So definitely, I think that's a pretty good sign going forward, and to solidify that years from now, this is going to do a lot of good things. Short term though, it doesn't necessarily always make that much sense, but based on the technicals, as long as this low was not below this low, it is still moving in the right direction. So even though this last week didn't necessarily move up equivalently to a lot of the other EVs, still does not break the technicals. But things that you need to watch for, at least in the short term. So with it being at $14.48, it is currently between the P and the R1, which in general isn't that bad. There's a lot of stocks out there that is currently trading between this S1 and the pivot. So in comparison to some other stocks, it's not doing too bad. For instance, looking at this, so Stochastic is currently at 70. There is a little bit more of a bearish sentiment that was starting to form over the last couple of days. Number of retail investors though have been taking advantage of these discounted prices, as you can see the nice bump up there. And as far as what big money was doing, so these are all the big transactions on the dark pool that did happen, for instance, on Friday. It was kind of active. So 3.12 million, 1.49 million, 1.2. Those are some big ones, but as you can see, it is full. Ton of transactions that did occur on the dark pool. Dark pool is usually linked to shorting, so I'll give you guys a quick overview of that. These are all the transactions that did happen for Rivian on the secondary market, which the secondary market is just the exchange that both you and I trade on, so typical retail investors. And there was some pretty big ones, like I said, so 2.27 million, 1.63. Majority of these, on a side note, have been and were buys based on the bid and the ask. You can tell the selling price and so forth. There was a 15.9 million that did happen after hours on Friday. And when you think about it, not many people are actually buying over 1 million shares after hours. That just, especially on Friday, people are kind of off. So definitely that one stood out to me. So big money behind the scenes are definitely buying this, and as they have been. And like I've mentioned in the past, based on what happens with Rivian, it goes down. A lot of people just spread a lot of fear about it. You clearly see that behind the scenes people are buying, and then what typically happens a couple of weeks from now, then you get a lot of analysts say, well, you know what, Rivian is a very good buy. That's after they already bought their position. So kind of a manipulated, flawed kind of scenario that typically happens, but this is the stock market. So once again, make sure you guys always do your own due diligence. Even myself, I am not a financial advisor, so it's always better to kind of research on your own and come to your own conclusions. But based on, for instance, options activities, what did happen, for instance, on Friday, $3.6 million in call premiums versus 1.24 million in puts. So this has been the scenario for the last 2, give or take, weeks. A lot more orientation towards calls, meaning people are assuming that it is going to trend up. And based on this chart right here, so this shows all the strike prices, expiry dates, and so forth, it is projecting based on this that it should be around the $15 range in the coming weeks and hopefully stay above that. So definitely that might be a pretty positive thing in that regard. And over and above that though, at the time of doing this video, there hasn't been really any recent news, no SEC filings. There was one that did come out on the 31st, but it's not really anything to kind of go out and buy Rivian because of it. It's just more of a summary of exactly what Rivian is going through, as well as Lucid and everything else. So kind of just known stuff. But speaking on Amazon and the delivery vans, there was this that was posted on Twitter, and I think this is pretty cool. It's only 8 seconds, but still it goes to show the magnitude that Rivian is providing obviously Amazon. So definitely I think that's a pretty good thing in that regard. But still, I do feel that a lot of people are just very fearful about the Nasdaq and just how much cash Rivian is burning through. So just a lot of tentative fear, at least in the short term. I'll give you guys a quick overview, for instance, of what shorts have been doing and where they're at, especially going into next week. So short score is currently 61, utilization is 29. So just based on that, I already can tell that it's not necessarily going to be a squeeze. But cost to borrow is all over the place, but very small, so 1.1%. So definitely something to watch for based on what shorts did on Friday. So Friday, obviously, like I mentioned, was a little bit more of a red day based on this, almost no momentum whatsoever. But shorts did increase 3.82 million shares, but 12.53% of the free float is being shorted, and that works out to be almost 77 million shares overall are being shorted. And just to put that in perspective, that works out to be $1.06 billion worth of shorts out there. And so again, it's just one of those scenarios that it just kind of sucks. But even looking here, it looks like it all went down on March 23rd. That's where you see a massive spike up, whereas short interest on Rivian was around 8%, give or take, so 8.75. And then overnight, it seems to have jumped to around 12, and it's kind of been hovering around there. So definitely March 23rd, something just did not really go Rivian's way, and nothing really comes to mind exactly what did happen on the 23rd. So let me know you guys' thoughts if you know potentially what that might have been. But generally speaking, I'll give you guys a quick deeper dive into, for instance, the technicals. So over the last week, it did try to break out, as you can see right here, but unfortunately it did get stopped, didn't necessarily have enough momentum to get above this 100-day moving average. So typically when it doesn't, it bounces off of that resistance, trends down, it consolidates, and usually tries again. So as you can see, several different days had a lot of volatility, as you can see based on the candles, but not enough momentum behind the scenes. So this was the consolidation period. It tried again, but unfortunately didn't necessarily have enough to really trend up. So still, based on what has happened, this doesn't mean that the technicals are broken and that it will be trending down. It still technically is above the 50-day moving average, which again is a pretty big pivot point, same as what the fib levels, like I mentioned. It's also higher percentile of the Bollinger Band. So I do feel that going into next week, you are going to have a lot of good momentum in the whole EV sector, and people are going to forget about this whole Nasdaq 100. People have generally, especially that invest nowadays, have very short memory spans. So they will forget this ever happened, for instance, on Monday or Tuesday, and then it'll be a brand new week and we'll go based on what is happening at the time. So in general, I do feel that that is just yesterday's news, and no pun intended in that, but generally I do feel that Rivian has what it takes to actually go up from here. But of course, like I said, I'm not a financial advisor. Logically, based on, like I mentioned on my last video, the latest Morningstar report does have the fair market value around, I think it's $21 for Rivian. So that one is a pretty good sign. So definitely, if you piece everything together, the bullishness on the options activity, the bullishness on the actual amount of big money that is buying behind the scenes, and the technicals, I do feel that it can easily trend up from here. But once again, I think this is just short-term talk. If you believe in Rivian and EV's bigger picture, definitely take advantage of these prices while you can. Without further ado, I appreciate you guys watching. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up and subscribe. Give yourself a shout out as well if you have been buying, selling, holding, what you have been doing with Rivian, and where you see things going. So let me know you guys' thoughts and all that. Don't forget to take advantage of this promo. It's been extended for a couple more days with Moomoo. Link in the description below and also the comment. Sign up for a free account and you get one free stock. Each stock is valued up to $2,000. So it is a complete no-brainer. And with that said, I appreciate you guys watching. Let's all make a lot of money on Rivian.